Happy April, everyone. I hope that your March was full of reading and full of good things. March was not the greatest reading month for me, but it was fine. I'm really pleased with what I read. I read 5 books, and actually something happened that doesn't usually happen, and it takes a lot for me to say this. 2 books were DNF'd. Whew. Usually it's really hard for me to not finish a book, because if I've invested time into a book, I want to be able to mark it off on Goodreads and get credit towards my reading goal. Usually I push through. So the last couple years, I've been experimenting with kind of giving myself permission to not finish books, but I still rarely choose to do so. I think that there's usually benefit in almost every book. And when I'm reading, I try to find the pieces that I do like. Even if overall I don't rate a book highly, there's always something to be said for every book. And I like trying to find the parts that I enjoy, even within books that I don't overall enjoy. That being said, 2 books, I will save those for the end. Also, my son gave me this mug, and it's one of my favorites. It's from one of my favorite movies. I love it so much. And I just want to say, before starting this, I know everybody's experience with books is so different, and that's one of the things that I love about reading. And books that I may love, other people may not like, and books that other people don't like, I might love. Did I say the same thing twice? No, I don't think so. My reviews and opinions are just that, my reviews and opinions. I would love to have dialogue with people, because so often I may not even notice things that other people notice about books, and I really appreciate that aspect of book community and being able to see and realize things that I may not have picked up on. So that caveat aside, here are my March books. Okay, I'm just gonna go in chronological order of what I read in March. So the first book that I read was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I'll be honest, I picked up this book rather reluctantly, because obviously this book has been all over. People have been raving about it for the most part, I feel like. It is one of the books right now. So I picked it up. I didn't really think that I was gonna like it, but I was curious because I wanted to know what it was about. And let me tell you, I loved it. I was hooked almost from page 1. I could barely put the thing down. And after I finished reading it, I had a massive book hangover. Usually when I have a book hangover, it's 1, maybe 2 days. This lasted almost 2 weeks. And the only reason I picked up another book is because I had a stack of library books that I had to read before they were due. Otherwise, I would not have read anything else for 2 weeks. I even shed literal tears at one point in this story, which I almost never do. So, needless to say, this was a 5-star, or on my channel, 5 bookmark read for me. If you don't know what this book is about, it is about someone named Violet Sorrengail, who is basically forced by her mother to join the training for dragon riders. The testing and the training to become a dragon rider is very daunting and quite brutal, and at the end of all that, the dragons may not even choose to bond with the riders. So Violet has to go through all of this training. She has people who are ready to stab her in the back, literally and metaphorically. She's trying to prove to herself and to her mom and to her childhood best friend that she is capable and worthy, all while not even knowing if a dragon will choose her at the end of it. I loved it. I loved it. There are 2 spicy scenes, but they're not until closer to the end of the book, which I appreciated because it felt more like part of the story and not just like, oh, here's a spicy book with some fantasy thrown in. It really just felt like a fantasy book that really drew me in, but did have some romance and spice as well. So Fourth Wing was my surprise 5-star read for March, and I really think it's going to be one of my top reads for all of 2024. The second book I read was Only If You're Lucky by Stacey Willingham. This book I gave 4 bookmarks. It was my first Stacey Willingham book, and I liked it. The story centers around college student Margot, who finds herself being drawn by the magnetic pull of Lucy and 2 of her friends. The 4 of them end up sharing a house off campus. Margot went away to this college to try to escape some pretty devastating things from her past, but she keeps finding more and more reminders of her past in her new place. Secrets abound. The chapters alternate between telling what happened in the past and present day, and the reader is along for the ride, kind of trying to figure out what is going on. Personally, I found the middle of the book to be a bit slow and somewhat repetitive, so I was prepared to give it 3 bookmarks, but the ending really picked up, and I didn't end up guessing all of the twists, which is always nice, so I ended up bumping it up to 4 bookmarks. My third read, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. This book I read aloud on my other channel, Classics with Bonnie, where I read aloud public domain books. I read this book in high school, so it was a reread, but I don't think I'll be reading it again. I gave this one bookmark. I assume we're all somewhat familiar with the story, whether we've watched the Disney movie Alice in Wonderland or read the book. But Alice is a little girl that finds herself on all sorts of adventures in a mysterious world where if she drinks certain things, she grows super big. If she eats certain things, she shrinks down to a tiny size. She meets magical caterpillars, magical cats, all sorts of creatures. Alice herself isn't super likable. She's kind of whiny and annoying to me. And this is about to be a spoiler, but again, I'm assuming we're all somewhat mostly familiar with the story because of the movie. But it ends up all being a dream that Alice has. I've had strange dreams, including one where apparently I was a spy chasing another spy and I was riding a motorized wheelchair up a waterfall with a slice of pizza. Strange things happen in dreams. But I feel like that's kind of the only semblance to a workable plot. And it just wasn't for me. So apologies to Lewis Carroll, but I did give this book one bookmark. Next is The Ayres by Rachel Hawkins. So previously, I think last year I read The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. It was fine, it was sweet, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't very heavy, it wasn't very dark, it wasn't like a gripping thriller. It was a good story. So I expected this to be rather the same. And in some ways it was. It still, in my opinion, wasn't very heavy, it wasn't very dark, but I did like this one a lot more. The story is written using regular chapters following kind of the present timeline, but interspersed through those chapters are things like newspaper articles or interviews with certain pertinent people from the past. And I kind of like that. I think that's a fun and unique way to give the reader pertinent information to the story. We find out early in the story that Ruby McTavish was kidnapped as a young child, and she ended up being recovered and returned to her very rich family. She grew up and ended up becoming a widow 4 times, and now in present day, Ruby has passed and she's left her entire estate to her adopted son, much to the chagrin of the other McTavish relatives. This book has family drama, lots of secrets, lots of twists, some twists that I called part of the twist but not all of it, and some twists that I didn't call at all. So it was a very fun read for me, and if you enjoy thrillers but you just need a lighter break, or if you have never read a thriller but you're interested in trying one that's not super dark or heavy, I feel like this was a good one. So overall, I gave this book 4 bookmarks. And the last book that I finished in March, Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is book 2 in the Letters of Enchantment series. The first book is Divine Rivals, which I read in January or February, I can't remember which. I think that my fatal mistake was reading this series so close to reading Fourth Wing. Because honestly, I don't think any other fantasy book will come close to what Fourth Wing is for me, at least not for a very long time. So I'm curious if I had read these books, you know, at a completely different time, if I would have enjoyed them more. The story picks up right after Divine Rivals ends, and I don't really know too much of what to say because the entire plot of the second book hinges on something that happens at the very end, a plot twist at the very end of Divine Rivals, so I don't want to give anything away. But I will say that the book continues to follow the stories of Ayres and Roman and their attempts to save their town, save their world, save their people, and fighting the gods along the way. You know, I liked it. It was sweet. It was a good story. It just felt a little more YA to me, which there's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy YA relatively often. It's just not Fourth Wing. So take that review for whatever it's worth. Okay, and now on to my DNF. I started reading Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. So, only a few chapters in, and I was already getting red flags. You know, when the guy that you know is about to be the love interest of the other main character is well known for only being interested in girls that don't like him, and he sees it as a chase to try to convince them, it's a no for me. It's a no. Plus, there's a lot of spice. Now, I read books with spice. Fourth Wing had spice. This just felt gratuitous to me, and just spice for spice's sake and not really adding to the story. Plus, this book is YA, which I know a lot of ages read YA, and different people have different opinions on spice content, clearly, but I can just think about a young person going to pick up this book off a shelf, not knowing what they're getting into, and getting a massive education on things that they didn't even necessarily want to know about. This was a lot. Obviously, I feel like I'm in the minority because Icebreaker has been really popular. So yeah, again, take my review for whatever it's worth. The next book is My Dearest Dietrich by Amanda Barrett. This book is technically a DNF, but I don't know if it's always going to be a DNF. This is historical fiction about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I didn't get very far into it, I'll be honest, so I don't know if I like it or not. My main hangup is I don't really read historical fiction. I used to read historical fiction a lot. It was my main genre, and then I was really emotionally burned and scarred by a historical fiction book that I just so desperately wanted to be real and true. It was a World War II historical fiction book, and 98% of it was fiction, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It was just emotionally scarring to me because I so desperately wanted it to be a true story. So since that book a few years ago, I've really cut back on my historical fiction. I don't know anything about my dearest Dietrich, I'll be honest. I don't know how much of it is the fiction part of it. I think historical fiction can be done very well. A lot of authors do a lot of research and do their due diligence. It's too soon for me to step back into that. So this book, it was for my book club. I'm not saying I'll never read it. I'm just saying right now, I'm not reading it. So it is at least temporary DNF. Okay, so that is all of my books from March. I don't have a specific TBR for April. I'm a huge mood reader, so I do have, I think, 3 other books out from the library that I will probably read, but we'll see how the mood strikes. I do plan to read Beartown by Frederick Backman in April. And I have a couple other ideas for things coming up for my TBR, so intrigue. Not really, but I'm intrigued. Anyways, I hope you all have a fabulous April and a fabulous month of reading. If she eats, that is all of my books. Now it's bugging me because, like, I feel like the door handle's like coming out of my head, and I keep thinking it's my hair like poking out, but it's a door handle.